Everybody, welcome to the Wokingham Borough Council Planning Committee, Wednesday the 29th of April. This meeting is not being held in our normal room, so the logistics don't work quite as well as we'd like, but the normal rooms we've been used are set aside for counting of postal votes connected with the election, so if you bear with us. Firstly, tonight, please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent. There's no fire drill planned. And those who've registered to speak have a public address system available to them, which hopefully you can all hear me clearly tonight. The proceedings are filmed, that is, the committee members are filmed, and speakers are filmed unless they've asked not to be. You'll see from the camera permission that it will just be recording the committee most of the time. And all this film is available on the council's website for those who weren't able to attend. The Planning Committee is made up of 9 elected members, borough councillors, and we're supported tonight by a variety of professional council officers. To my right, Mary Severin, last but one from the end, is the borough solicitor, who's here to give us advice on legal matters. Next to her is Tricia Harcourt, who's the Senior Democratic Services Officer, who's clerk to tonight's committee. And then Tim Holton is Vice Chairman of the committee. I'm Simon Weeks, I chair the committee. Claire Lawrence is sitting on my left. Claire is the Head of Development Management. And next to her is Chris Easton, who's the Service Manager for Highway Development. So those are the people who are here to give us advice and guidance. The rest of the Planning Committee members are sat in the front row here. And we have apologies from two committee members this evening. The Planning Committee is quasi-judicial and we have formal and set procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application. Then I will call in turn only those people who have pre-registered to speak. If you could, where would we like you would come forward to, Tricia? Will they speak from there, sit from the position they're normally in? Okay. The microphone is controlled by the button on the microphone, and when the red light comes on the microphone, that's when your allotted time starts. Please bear in mind that members are interested in the quality of what you have to say rather than the quantity. I must emphasise that only those that are pre-registered to speak may speak. No others, including town or parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters, are permitted to address the committee or interrupt the meeting in any way. Following the planning officer's presentation and comments of the registered speakers, the planning committee members will consider, question, seek clarification for any matters that they need clarification on, and hopefully reach a decision on each of the applications tonight, which may or may not agree with the planning officer's recommendation. Finally, I just need to remind you that as the local planning authority, our role is to determine valid planning applications using local and national policy. Our role is not to redesign proposals, suggest alterations to schemes, or comment on whether they are good or bad ideas. We simply have to apply the rules that apply to them. So we'll go straight on to tonight's planning committee. Apologies we have from...
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from Lindsay Ferris and Bobby Pitts.
Those apologies are noted. Does any member need to declare an interest in any of the items? There are no conflicts of interest. Are there any applications to be withdrawn or deferred? There are none. Okay. In that case, we'll move straight on to sign the minutes. Members, do you have any queries on the 2 sets of minutes? Because as you know, we've had a lot of planning committee meetings in the last few weeks. We've got a meeting of the 25th of March and the 1st of April. In that case, I shall sign those as a true record. Okay, we'll now move straight on to the first application, which is an outline application for land at Cutbush Lane, and it's following an outline approval. It's a reserved matters application, and this is going to be presented tonight by Chris Howard. Yes, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Tonight I'm here to present the land north of Cutbush Lane in Shinfields. It's a reserved matters application and the applicant is Bellway Homes. Proposal is a reserve matters application for 126 dwellings. Under consideration is layout, landscape, scale and appearance. The principle of development was established under the outline planning application in 2013, and this established access to the site, quantum of development, development parameters and infrastructure requirements. In terms of the site in the context of the South M4 SDL, the site is located within an allocated site within the SDL, which was allocated by the Spatial Framework Plan by the adopted supplementary planning document. It is located to the north of Cutbush Lane and sits adjacent to the Eastern Relief Road and Science Park. The significant majority of the SDL planning applications have been approved, which brings about certainty over delivery of the infrastructure requirements. Just to give you a quick update on the Eastern Relief Road, you may or may not be aware that work has commenced on site for the Eastern Relief Road. They started in April and it's expected to be completed in spring 2016. Another bit of background to the site, it also serves an important function for the South M4 bus strategy. The bus is to be routed directly through the site with a 15-minute each way service to the centre of Reading. This runs through the other sites within the SDL and Shinfield, Spencerswood, Fremont Cross. This is the site location outlined in red. The site comprises of 7.6 hectares of land. The site has a central valley type feature running along it. There's a man-made reservoir to the north of the site. The existing topography of the site slopes from north to south by up to 9 metres, so it is quite a sloping site. And it also slopes from east to west towards the Central Valley feature. The site's bounded to the west by modern housing development and to the south by Cutbush Lane, and the Eastern Relief Road would run across the eastern boundary of the site. The existing land use is mostly agricultural. This is the proposed layout for the site. This follows from the outline plan application has been refined in order to respond to the levels of the site and the site constraints. A new primary street would run through the centre of the site, which has been designed to be wide enough to accommodate buses. There is a secondary pedestrian cycle and bus-only access onto the Eastern Relief Road, and there is a small tertiary access serving 5 dwellings which would be accessed from Cutbush Lane. The site layout has been informed by the site constraints and incorporates the Central Valley feature where the SUDs are proposed to be located, so responds well to the existing landform of the site. The applicant has proposed 3 different character areas for the site in order to respond to the site constraints and also the existing built form, and this has arisen from a character appraisal. Along the centre of the site we have the avenues area. This is a taller dwelling types along this road and higher density buildings, which will give you a sense of legibility along this street. We also have the residential street, which is slightly lower density, more informal, and will act as a buffer between the site and Eastern Relief Road as well as the existing residential development. And we have a looser rural edge character area to the north and south of the site. To the south, this responds well to the semi-rural nature of Cutbush Lane, and to the north, again, this faces onto some public open space. In terms of building heights, this plan shows the building heights. The majority of the buildings would be 2-storey on the site. Most of the 2.5-storey development is along a Central Spine Road, and occasional 2.5-storey developments around the western part of the site. The applicant has worked within the parameters of the outline planning application and has kept the number of units of 2.5-storey to only 19. In terms of soft landscaping, around 1.9 hectares of open space is proposed for the development, and the layout utilises the topography of the site, again sort of retaining the sort of central valley feature of the site, the SUDs, and there is also landscaping towards the northwest of the site, which acts as a buffer for the built form and the Eastern Relief Road. The landscaping is also incorporated within the development of street trees and low-level planting to soften the impact of the built form. Moving on to some slides showing the proposed street scenes. This is the avenues character area which runs along the Central Spine route. Sorry, this is residential streets at the type there. This runs along a central spine route. This is the 2-storey development, and this 2.5-storey development. The applicant has applied a similar sort of design approach with these buildings to create a sense of legibility, but has used details such as brickwork to add features to the building. In terms of the residential streets, this is taken towards the rear of the site. The applicant has proposed quite a variety of design dwelling types here, and applied detailing such as brickwork and render to the buildings, as well as flint and tile. Moving on to the rural edge street scenes, these are a lowest density form, mostly detached dwellings, and again the applicant has used a range of dwelling types to have a variety of built form within the development. Moving on to some artist impressions. This is an artist impression taken from the Cutbush Lane. This shows a sort of range of dwelling types in a looser form of development along Cutbush Lane, and as you can see the taller buildings in the background along the main primary route. This also shows the soft landscaping such as a central suds feature. This is the rural edge character area overlooking the public open space to the north of the site. Again, sort of detached buildings, loose form of development responding well to the constraints of the site. And this is a view of the site adjacent to the Eastern Relief Road. Again, a wide landscaping strip between the houses and the Eastern Relief Road, acting as a buffer and providing soft landscaping for development. In terms of garden sizes, the applicant has adhered to all the Woking Borough Council 11 metre depth standards, and there's sufficient amenity space for the future occupants of the dwellings. The proposed garden standards and heights of the buildings adjacent to the existing residential development ensures that there are no issues in terms of overlooking, overbearing or loss of light to the existing residents surrounding the site. And in terms of internal space standards, again the applicant has adhered to the MDD requirements. These are internal floor plans for the typical internal floor plans for 2-bed, 3-bed and 4-bed house types. This will ensure there's sufficient space for the future occupants of the dwelling. Parking, the application proposes 398 spaces, 51 of which are visitor parking. The parking is provided in accordance with the Woking Borough Council standards, and it equates to 2.35 spaces per dwelling excluding garages, or 3.16 spaces per dwelling with garages. Cycle parking would be provided within the large gardens and all streets. Moving on to the recommendation. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report and the members' update. I'll just go through the members' update. There's just a correction to the report. I use the word up to. It should have been including 35% affordable housing within the SDLs. 35% is a fixed figure. And the separation standards in page 32, paragraph 1441. All the houses meet the council separation standards. The plan numbers have included, which need to be attached to condition 2, so there's a typo there. And there's an additional condition on the point of technicality, and an additional highways condition for a parking management strategy. This will ensure the visitor parking spaces are retained. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Are you still on?
No.
Could you turn your microphone off? It's interfering. Yeah, the red. If you press it, just turn it off. The grey button. Thank you.
I thought I might get the sound a bit better.
All right. Okay. Chris, can we just clarify a couple of points? Do you have a copy of the original conditions associated with the outline?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Could you just remind us how many conditions were associated with the outline application?
There were 43 conditions on the outline planning application.
Okay, can you turn off, Chris?
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Members, as you know, we visited this site back in December 2013, a site visit, and subsequent to that, an outline application came forward as referred to in the report, and Chris has referred to. That covers the principle of the development, This is the fine detail associated with the reserved matters. No members that we have, nobody registered to speak about this application, whether from the parish council, ward member or any local residents. So any particular points people would like to cover on this? John, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. There's only two issues that I'd like to ask questions on. What's the width of a bus? How wide's a bus, typically?
Chris on that one?
About 2.5 metres.
2.5 metres, okay. It's just that I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to have buses running through this development, and if you get on-street parking, you're not going to get two buses past, are you? That's 6.1 metres.
That's correct. I mean, obviously the buses won't be running through continuously, there'll be probably 4 in the outlet. However, obviously in respect of the outline application, which Chris has mentioned earlier, there's a traffic regulation order secured in the section 106 to prevent obviously on-street parking. Therefore, if it does become an issue, there's the funding and the TRO in place, or the funding in place to secure a TRO to prevent on-street parking. But in relation to the parking things that have been put forward, we're quite happy with what's in there. And it's unlike some of the estates. I know we have had issues in some where buses run through. It's not like Mitford Gardens, obviously, in Shipfield or Spencer's Wood, which obviously is quite bendy. It's not a straight road. This is quite simple. Comes in off the Eastern Ridge Road, runs a nice, pretty much straight route straight down to Cuppage Road, and we're quite content with the design.
Obviously, that means that as a council, we're going to have to make civil parking enforcement quite important to bring that forward. And that's something you would support, I guess?
I would do.
Okay, just one other question. The parish council has actually asked if the management of the green spaces is something that they could be offered before it's offered to a contractor. Would the developers be prepared to do that?
My understanding is that it's been assigned already to Woking Borough Council, is that correct?
That's
Chris?
correct.
Yeah. It's part of the 106 agreement, so the legal agreement was that. Chris?
Thank you, Simon. A couple of points on parking and also the bus service. Just on the question of that parking restriction, from what you said, Chris, I got the impression that that's not going to be implemented from the start. I just wonder why it wouldn't be, because we want to set the pattern that people don't park on the road. The other question that I have is that in the text it says about the bus service being up to 15 minutes, but Chris Howard has just said it is a 15-minute service. I think my question would be, are we assured of 15 minutes during the peak requirement? And also, at what stage during the development would the bus service be implemented?
In terms of the TRO, it's something that obviously is yellow lines that would need to be in place, and again the enforcement issue which we currently do sometimes struggle with. I think because of the yellow lines, it's not so I think we need to, it's there as a fallback, so I think the parking is sufficient for us not to have to put it in now, but it's there as a safety net should it be required. In terms of the buses, I think something that's probably worth pointing out, Chris mentioned the timetable now for the Eastern Relief Road, that's delivery of early next year. This site was initially approved without the Eastern Relief Road in place, and therefore this site wasn't going to be actually served by buses for a considerable period of time, because it was only due to have the first section of the Eastern Relief Road built by 600 dwellings in Shinfield West and by 1,250 dwellings in Shinfield West for the completion. But due to HCA funding and the work that Council has done with the university to deliver that road early, we're now in a place where this site will be served by buses considerably sooner than it would have previously been. And therefore the travel plan, My Journey, which has been brought into by this application as well, gives the council much more flexibility to get that site served early by buses and other sustainable modes.
Just come back on that, when you said be served early, how early?
Basically, as soon as the road accesses Shinfield West, as soon as the road accesses the Science Park area and that roundabout which is being constructed as we speak, and once this site's completed, there's no reason that the minute the bus can go through the site, the road's adopted, then the bus. We're currently looking at the moment, working with the rest of the developers in South the M4 SDL through the interim strategy for Spencer's Wood and Fremont Cross, as well as the full strategy, which money's been secured through all the Section 160s that the Council's public transport team are currently looking through to get tendered. So it's in the Council's control to deliver, and it's with all the teams required to obviously make sure that it's there by, I think it's the 50th occupation in Shibbenfield West, but obviously that will be quicker by the time this site's in, so we hope to have it all in place by the 25th to 50th occupation on this site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could we just have a look at that map, one of the early slides you had with all the road system on it? The one before, is the one before that? Yes. On the bottom half centre, there's that brown painted section. Is that raised on the right hand side of it to prevent vehicles going in the bottom and out of the top? Is it just painted brown? Is it just a slightly raised area? Or?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's not right. It's a bus route that improve.
Okay, so vehicles can come in the bottom and go all the way through, and buses could come through that bottom part as well, could they?
Yeah, but the vehicles.
Use the mic.
Sorry.
The vehicles will access from Cutbush Lane at the bottom of the site, and the bus access is restricted at the point of Eastern Relief Road, so there's no through flow for vehicles. Just point down where you can see the arrow. The bus gate will be in that place.
Okay. And all of the roads are the same width, are they? 6.1 metres? No, the narrow in some parts of it.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, there's a street hierarchy set through the site. So the main street where the buses run through is 6.1, and then you've got the two sections. There's two sections running east-west that are kind of coloured brown on the plan. They're intended to be unadopted roads, and therefore they'll be obviously of a lesser standard. Probably, I can't remember the widths, but obviously down to 4.8 metres. There's sufficient parking within all the dwellings.
But there is a brown bit of the narrow.
And obviously as well as the business parking, the unallocated parking on the site.
Thank you.
But it's just worth adding, actually, it's all been tracked to make sure that refuse vehicles can service the site, and that's one of our minimum requirements.
Thank you.
Two questions. Condition number 49 on the noise barriers and the environmental statement. It doesn't seem to say whether there will be any noise barriers on Eastern Relief Road. And since these new residents will have a major road going by them, I would expect that either trees or some kind of noise barrier would be possible. And the second question about these traffic regulation orders. Since CPE is not in effect yet, and CPE has been proposed only around schools and at railroad stations, who's going to be paying for this CPE that's going to be going through there to make sure that no one parks on these streets?
I think I just point out that what you refer to as a condition is not a condition. This is just the narrative that there are only a few conditions on this, because most of the conditions are actually applied at the outline stage. So, Chris, could you elaborate on that?
In terms of the parking controls, CPE is obviously an enforcement issue that needs to be brought in across the council to apply enforcement everywhere. But obviously a traffic regulation order is in place that puts the legislation, the requirement on the road, which can be enforced by the police. So it can be enforceable the minute the TRO is in place. The CPE gives the council powers to obviously also enforce as well as the police.
Experience so far has shown that the police are not too interested and they're busy with other things, usually to enforce things like parking regulations on a street where it's not causing. If they're parking in the middle of the road, yes. If they're parking on a verge and a little bit off, I don't think so. But
that's one of the reasons we're pursuing civil parking enforcement, because of the lack of police response to these sort of issues.
Any other issues, please? Okay, members, I don't see anyone else indicating they wish to speak. We have a clear recommendation in front of us. As I say, the principle of development of 126 dwellings at this site was agreed back in early 2014. In fact, it was at the end of 2013. So there are only a few conditions associated with the reserved matters, and the two additional conditions referred to in the members' update, which are listed at the bottom of page 4. So members, could you please indicate whether you're prepared to support this application? So that is approved unanimously. by the 7 members present. Thank you, Chris. We now move on to school next. Okay, we now move on to an application to expand Graiseley School in Mere Oak Lane, Graiseley. Ashley, you're going to take us through this one? Straight across the
Thank you, Chairman. The proposal before the committee is for the proposed erection of a new extension to an existing school, Graiseley Primary School, to provide a range of ancillary facilities, including classrooms, a multi-use games area, car parking and other sporting facilities. Graiseley Primary School is located in Graiseley in the countryside and currently emits a half form of entry every year. Members may remember that we approved a modular classroom last year for a single bulge form. Well, this extension is to bring the entire school up to a full form of entry at all years, so obviously some significant efficiencies there. The extension is to be located adjacent to the existing building and maintains the form. It's a very pretty school, Graiseley Primary, and so they've maintained that appearance through the proposals. Here's a photo of it. It's quite historic in character. This is the additional land. So this land is located, it's where the car park is to the south here, and where the new football field and mugger will be located at the bottom of this image. The school currently has a very constrained site, and the only lawful hard play area is at the up at the north of the site in this picture here. So there will be a significant betterment of the play space available. The other problem at Graiseley is it only has 11 car parking spaces at the moment, and so the car parking will be significantly enhanced with a drop-off area and car parking. In terms of updates, the ecological holding reason has been withdrawn by the ecologist on receipt of new information, which has led to the recommendation of 2 additional conditions and an informative. And that is it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, members. As you know, that we didn't have a site visit at this particular occasion because I think members are familiar with the location. Drawing attention to a couple of particular points on it. That it's proposed that our normal hours of starting and allowing work are normally, as you know, 8 till 6, but requested that they brought forward to 7 o'clock in the morning for 2 reasons. One, the need to get the work done, ready for the next intake of pupils, and secondly, because the nearest dwellings are some distance away and they should not be impacted. I think that's reflected in the lack of any objections to the application. So, as you know, this only comes to the committee because the council itself is the applicant, as the controller and owner of the school. So are there any particular points people would like to raise, or can we carry on with this one? Chris?
Just one, the increase in games area. I think the fact that there is an increase is welcome. I just wonder where that leaves the school from the point of view of national standards. I understand it's still short, but is it very short?
The school is short, yes. As per the update, there isn't a specific size for a Muga at an existing school that requirement. There are hard and soft play standards, and the school is short on those. But obviously, it's done everything it can to increase the amount of space available, and any betterment is really weighs in favour of the proposal.
Thank you.
And just also remind members that there's a very significant increase in available parking on the site, which is likely to diminish local congestion, which, as we all know, is a feature of all 67 of the schools in Woking. So I see no one else indicated to speak, so we'll take this one straight to the vote. And members, could you please indicate that you're prepared to support this application F 2014-2662? Again, that is unanimously carried. Thank you, members. Now move on to land at Grovelands Avenue workshops. And Chris Lancaster is going to take us through this one. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is Grosvenor Avenue Workshops, Grosvenor Park, Winnersh. Proposes erection of residential development of 6 2-bedroom, 2-storey residential units. The application will be referred to the committee as proposed by Working Housing Limited, which, as the Chairman referred to previously, is if any of an application by a member, a part of the council, hence it's been referred to committee. The site in question at the moment is a vacant site joining the Grosvenor's workshops and sitting next door to the Grosvenor's caravan site. The plan I've shown you there just indicates, well, we have an arrow of the access to the site. It isn't actually very clear from the drawing, but as you can see, the green arrow shows the access. It runs through the caravan park in through what is actually a parking area at the moment. That's the site from an aerial point of view. Again, not 100% clear, but it's just below the 3 white buildings on the site. This is the proposed access route. And you can see on the right-hand side there's number 12 Grosvenor's Park, which is mobile home, and the access will go straight through where the lamppost is. There's another slightly oblique view of the same mobile home. And again, the access runs through Grosvenor's Park, just to indicate there is a 10-mile-an-hour speed restriction on the green, and there are various other restrictions to control the speed of the vehicles passing through. This is the current access to the site, which runs through the workshops, and as you'll see from the update members, this is been subject to quite a lot of discussion and representation by local people. We believe that ought to be the access to the site rather than through the mobile home site. I've indicated that is in your update. A few of the key points that I'll be raising as I go through. That shows again the proposed access. This indicates where the speed restrictions take place, the employment site and the alternative access. The proposals for social rented housing are on the 3 2-storey blocks of semi-detached flats. These are the figures which appear in your report, explaining the site area, the other key statistics. This is the proposal, the three blocks and the formal development. Chairman and I were discussing what 2.5, also 1.5 or 2-storey means. This is 2-storey development for the purposes of an application, although the applicant did refer to it as 1.5. In reality, there is no such thing as 1.5, it is 2-storey. Slightly larger version of it. The majority of objections, as I noted before, relates to the means of access, which is through the mobile home park. The objection is larger on grounds of highway safety and traffic disturbance. There are a number of children within the estate, elderly and disabled persons, a number of people who are actually in wheelchairs or other disability vehicles. However, you'll see the highways officer has raised no objections. The alternative access, we have gone back to the property services and said, is that access available? Whether it's available on a temporary basis for developing the site or a permanent basis. Just again remind you where we are, the alternative access. This is in your update, but that basically says property services don't believe it is available. So I'll just run through it very quickly. And it's really, there's much to do with the rights of the existing tenants and the ability to actually deliver that temporary access. So the property services manager's view is that this access is not available. The update includes a recommendation which is slightly amended from your report. The highways officer is now satisfied with the arrangements for access for refuge vehicles, and the ecologist is now satisfied that sufficient work has been done on the reptile survey to raise no objections. The survey takes 7 days to complete, 7 individual days. They have carried out 5 individual days now, and are satisfied on that basis that nothing's turning up. And so the ecologists have to recommend approval. Condition 20 seeks submission of sustainable drainage system. However, further discussions with the Council's drainage advisors consider appropriate to seek details in advance of permission being granted, and the recommendation is amended accordingly. I've just added this, Chairman, at the end. It was a matter of the relationship between the, I'm sorry it's not that clear, but it's a relationship between the number 12 and the proposed development. I just wanted to put it in the context of the borough design guidance to show that the proposed houses are 10 metres and they face towards number 12. They are 10 metres from the boundary, and then there's another 1.2 metres to the side of the mobile home in question. And you can probably see from there is an opportunity for further landscaping along the common boundary, and that there is a 1.8 metre close boarded fence proposed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Members attended a site visit last Friday morning to look at this. I think it would be fair to say that members were not keen on the proposed access, so we went to look at it from the commercial units at the other side, and we asked the planning officer to go away and find out whether it would be possible, firstly to see whether it would be possible to have a permanent entrance from the rear or from the commercial premises, and if that wasn't possible, whether it would be possible to have a temporary access during the construction period to avoid the inevitable larger vehicles coming in during that construction phase. But as we've heard, the landlords and the tenants don't want that, and obviously as they have a lease that allows them to use that as parking spaces, we're not in a position to tell them that no, we want to use it as an entrance. So we have people registered to speak on this, so I'll firstly come to them and then we'll have a more detailed discussion. So could I ask Lynn Morton to speak? Hello there.
Hello.
If you just press the red button, your microphone's live and your 3 minutes starts.
Okay. I've got two things that were written out. The first one is from the lady that lives in number 12. Her mobile home is directly next to the access, the new access. So it's one of our gravest concerns is regarding the entrance to the proposed building site, because it's on a dangerous blind bend, turning left to get into the cul-de-sac, and that's a very sharp bend at the top of the green. The park is an old landfill site, prone to movement. Road and pavements are currently in need of repair, and heavy vehicles and more traffic will aggravate the situation more. One of the lampposts at the corner of the cul-de-sac it leans at the moment. The pavement edge in the grate is sinking. The very narrow roads can't cope with any more traffic. Ambulances frequently park in the cul-de-sac to transport residents to and from the hospital. In that cul-de-sac you have five disabled mobility scooter users have to drive onto the road in the cul-de-sac to enter their mobiles, as the pavement on the side of the road is cracked and you cannot ride your mobility scooter on it. Health and safety wasn't an issue for the council when they used to use that access, the other access route, the double entrance at the corner of the workshops to access the field, where they used to keep all their heavy machinery a number of years ago according to their protocols. So why can't they use it now? Please would the council consider another site visit to look at the double entrance at the corner of the workshops, which would seem to be a much safer option, listening to what you said. That's not going to happen. Okay, this is just something from most of the residents on Grovelands Park are against this. Okay, so this is just another statement. Grovelands Park is a landfill site prone to movement and subsidence. The roads and the pavements are currently in need of repair due to this subsidence. So there is a further possibility that the bases of our homes that our homes stand on, the roads and the very fragile sewage pipes would be damaged if heavy construction traffic is in constant use through the mobile home site. Safety issues are a big concern, not only to number 12 but to us, as most residents are older. There's only 4 families on the site with children. Most of the residents are elderly, retired, or like me. I bought a mobile home on that site because that's where I want to retire. The proposed access to the new homes is on 2 dangerous blind bends. They are 90-degree bends that just turn left and left again. Again, the original entrance to the plot is next to the Grovelands Park workshops. I won't even read the next bit because that's not going to happen. Being overlooked is another concern. You're telling us here that the only caravan that's going to be overlooked is number 12. If you actually look at the site, the houses are set back, so there are a number of other mobile homes who back onto the site. That's where the bedrooms are. That's what's going to be overlooked. We also pay ground rent for the upkeep of our mobile home park. I'm assuming that these houses are going to be using the utilities. Will these houses have to pay the same ground rent as we do?
Could I ask you to summarise the 3 minutes of just time?
Sorry, we feel that we'll lose the ethos of park home living. That's why people have lived there for 30 years plus, because it's a mobile home site. Thank you.
Could you turn your microphone on?
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think you recognise the challenges we face in terms of not being able to use the alternative entrance, which members of this committee thought would be preferable. Prue, I think you'd like to speak. Sorry, now, could I call Richard Coops? Sorry, I'm speaking ahead of myself. Sorry, Prue as local ward member, please.
Thank you. Because my concern is primarily about the construction traffic. Grosvenor Park is a mobile home park. The mobile homes are delivered on site and put on a pitch. There's no construction required to do that. There's no brick deliveries, there's no soil removal or arrival, there's no concrete mixers, there's no contractors parking, but all of those things will be needed to build the houses. Now the roads on Grosvenor Park are unadopted, they're very narrow, they have nasty little speed bumps on them, and they have sharp right-angled bends, and they are not built to adoptable standards, and they don't have proper foundations. I don't believe they are suitable for heavy construction traffic. Now, something else has occurred to me when I read the members' update and I saw what you'd said about the word licence and lease triggering my mind. This is actually a mobile home park. It is not subject to the same legislation as unadopted roads in other places. It's subject to legislation governing park homes. And it's not entirely clear to me that it's okay to put construction traffic for a non-mobile home purpose through a mobile home park. I see no reference in the report to the fact that there is legislation governing mobile home sites and what the rules are about putting traffic of that nature through. So I would be very grateful if you could not have another look, because there are gates there, so they did used to use that entrance. So I don't quite understand that point, at the entrance on the other side, is whether actually it is allowable to send the construction traffic through a mobile home park. Without actually having looked up the legislation. So if you put a rider on for the drainage, I would be very grateful if you could put a rider on to say that you're delegating that responsibility to the development management manager to check that the legislation has all been complied with before you give the go-ahead to the application.
Okay, thank you, Pro. Chris, how are you on the issue of this? It's been raised by Prue about the mobile home park and the different legislation that applies there. I appreciate it's quite a technical area. I wouldn't necessarily expect you to be able to answer it now. And is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, in all honesty, I'm not sure if Chris had the plan up there, which showed the highway adoption. To be correct, it's not highway adopted, it's private land, obviously owned by the council. So my remit kind of stops at the end of the highway boundary in terms of knowledge of what can and can't go on the highway. It's private property. I can't comment about how construction traffic, although the construction vehicles would probably be no dissimilar in size, I guess, to the vehicle that would be delivering a caravan to that park at some point for replacement.
That's every 30 years.
Yeah, hang on, through the chair, please. I think we'd just say that
I made that point on site. Chris made the valid point that the vehicles required to deliver park homes are very substantial, often somewhat bigger than normal vehicles on the road, but I also made the point that they are very infrequent, typically perhaps every 20-25 years. Claire, have you any suggestions on how we might address some of these? Because there are obvious concerns about, I don't think so much the established use of it once it's in place, but during the construction. Obviously we've heard a number of issues about the state of pavements, highways, sewers. Obviously those are not planning matters that we're here to consider tonight. We're talking about the principle of whether development should be allowed. And clearly if tenants are dissatisfied with the way the landlord is looking after the infrastructure, that's something they need to make representations to the council about. But it's not something that we can tie to this particular application. Okay, have you any suggestions on how we might try and address these concerns?
Thank you, Chairman. Chris already explained that the land is in private ownership, so consequently the responsibility of the highway authority is they don't have any responsibility for that land, for that access way. I'm certainly not aware of any legislation in the planning remit that would address the rights of certain vehicles through any park, mobile home park. And so my advice would be that we're here to consider the planning issues in association with the planning application. And the planning application is, we can't be looking at other legislation and using other legislation to justify refusal of a planning application. So even though I appreciate that there might be legislation that we're not aware of, in connection with a planning application, I would advise members that we can't justify refusal on that basis, unless Mary's aware of anything obscure that I'm not. No.
Right, let's hear from some of the members that attended the site visit. John, and then Rochelle. Sorry, I'll come to Rochelle because she's local ward member as well.
I'm very troubled by the construction traffic going through that park. The roads are extremely narrow. The roads are not as well maintained as they should be. And any large construction lorry will probably damage somebody, damage either a person along the way or some of the mobile homes in the process. I don't think the roads are wide enough to allow that. People park on the side of the road there, and I don't think there's actually any way for them to get a large construction vehicle in there in any way, shape, or form. I think that if they would consider offloading to smaller vehicles to come into the estate, that might be more acceptable. But a large vehicle, I cannot, in good conscience, really say that they could do that without harming somebody. And I don't think it's a good idea.
Some sympathy with your comments, but obviously we have seen, although they're infrequent, very large vehicles, considerably bigger than construction traffic, will occasionally deliver park homes to that site. So it's inaccurate to say large vehicles can't access the site. Clearly they have to do so with extreme caution. What I'm wondering about is, Chris, condition 12, the construction management plan, how would that help us in this, Chris?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I was just flagging you there. I mean, there are a number of conditions which pick up on the sort of issues we're talking about. I mean, just condition 12 particularly, construction method statement. It could deal with whatever we wanted to in many ways, and if the members feel that is something they want built into the construction management conditions, we will make sure that is done, that is covered. And they are a fairly generous form of I'm sorry.
Use this one, Chris, use this one.
Is that now working, Chairman? Right. Yes, that's better. Yes, I mean, obviously the construction management condition, it is a vehicle for us to control these matters, the size of the vehicles that deliver to the site, when it takes place, the parking on site. I can see no reason why we couldn't use that as a method of covering a lot of these issues through the process.
Right. I notice there's a representative of Wokingham Housing here this evening. Correct?
I am Wokingham Housing.
Yes. Are Wokingham Housing proposing to subscribe to the considerate construction scheme that we're seeing increasingly used by some of the more professional organisations?
I'm sure that we would comply with all the necessary regulations, highways, traffic. We're a reputable part of the council, and we wouldn't wish to evade any responsibilities that are placed upon us.
Okay. John, I think yours wants to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I never actually went to the site visit, but I've canvassed this quite often, and I think I must agree with the roads. You're right, they are big vehicles that deliver mobile homes, but they're nowhere near as heavy as brick lorries or cement mixers. I can tell you that now, having worked with commercial vehicles. I just need to understand, we own the alternative access, is that correct? And we're being told, because of regulations in the lease, that we can't use it?
Chairman. That's correct. I mean, there's a full quote from the officer concerned in your update on page 8, I think it is, and that deals with why it's not accepted. It's an issue of the tenancy agreements as much as anything, the actual ability to do this. The employment site also has a one-way system through it, which this would effectively contradict, but it is a matter for the property services and their arrangements with their own tenants, so they would have to do another negotiation to achieve it.
I would suggest that we have that negotiation with the tenants. It's a short-term problem. It doesn't have to be one way. I expect the deliveries will be early in the morning. It will be very easy for us to control the deliveries to the site. I think, these are going to be affordable housing, something that we do need in the borough, so I'm very keen that they get built. But at the same time, I don't want to be causing havoc for people that have been established on site for 30 years. And the road, there's no question about it, the road that those mobile homes on is the typical mobile home that you would see on holiday camps, that type of road. And to put a 40-ton brick lorry across it, I think you could cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think, John, that's one thing we mustn't lose sight of, is that construction anywhere causes disruption, disturbance, and can indeed cause localised damage to road surfaces. This is a common fact. It's not unique to Grovelands Park. We don't go around stopping development elsewhere because it might damage the roads.
I agree with you, Chairman, but we should try and minimise it wherever we can.
Let's hear from some others. Anyone else wishing to speak? Chris.
Thank you. I've looked at the question of what happens if we can't have that access, and it says condition 23, which has been added in the members' update: parking and turning space to be provided. No part of any buildings hereby permitted shall be occupied or used until the vehicle parking and turning space has been provided. I think that's much too late. The parking and turning needs to be provided very early on in the construction, otherwise that could lead to chaos in the road there. I appreciate this may not arise now, but if we have to go in that way, then I really think that condition needs to be amended. That's condition 23. And the other thing is that in the construction management plan, can we cover the situation? I'm concerned that we say that vehicles can't go on site until a certain time. What arrangement would we, or what conditions could we put in that would actually stop construction vehicles parking just a little bit outside the site and still causing havoc? Can we put a limit on the distance away that could be enforced?
Well, I think the construction management plan that Chris has referred to earlier, that can be whatever we want it to be, because they're going to have to get that discharged, and we can have as tough a construction management plan as we think we can justify. Clearly, as I said though, you've got to bear in mind that all construction of anything causes disruption and disturbances to the site. So any conditions that we would apply would have to pass a test of reasonableness. Okay, so it wouldn't be a question of nothing must park within a mile of the site, and all deliveries must be in a very narrow window each day. It's got to be something that's reasonable. But the other fact is, don't forget that site, Rochelle drew to our attention the amount of pedestrian traffic cutting through on that approach road to Grovelands to the school. And obviously construction, those roads are narrow with sharp bends, and construction traffic at school time is not a great mix either. So I'm uncomfortable about this. Okay, Tim.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to be agreeing with what John has just been saying about the negotiation with the tenants. And I would like to know how long the leases actually are, because the leases could only be a few months away, so it would be an ideal opportunity to discuss it with them. But I also come to that one-way system on the site, and I don't really understand why the top end cannot be two-way. So you can go in, so there's no reason to go into the industrial area. So those would be my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My concerns are about the use of the site. It's down in the MDD for employment B1, and we're proposing, of course, to put residential in. The site's owned by the council. What I'd like to know is what efforts have been made by the council to market the land for employment use. So if the council hasn't seriously tried to market it for employment, then I don't think it justifies traffic use.
And Chris, when you answer that, perhaps you would recognise also that we've heard from Property Services that all the commercial units there are tenanted. So it suggests to me there is a demand for that kind of small unit in that area.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. So there's a number of questions. Can I just sort of work backwards? Condition 23, that actually doesn't relate to construction. It obviously relates to the development once it's in operation. Is to make sure there is parking for the people who are living there. It's a very different function than the other conditions about construction. So that's the distinction you need to make. So that purpose is purely for the development in operation. We've got to have car parking there before it's occupied. So it's separate from the issues perhaps you've been discussing about construction. Again, taking these things into account, can I just give one other aspect I've got on screen here? One of the residents raised the issue of overlooking of adjoining properties. Just to say there are no windows in the side of the proposed elevations there, so that there's no overlooking of the adjoining properties. The only one where there is a potential overlooking is number 12, which it faces towards. The issue of the loss of employment, it is dealt with in the report. Bear with me, so I'm going to get it in front of me. I don't believe there is evidence of marketing as such, but I mean, basically the report talks about the policy wouldn't be prepared to object to its loss. So that's the issue.
Say again, please.
I'm sorry. Policy. The policy section of the report deals with the issue of employment. Let me just read it to you. It says planning policy will not formally object, commenting that the site wouldn't prevent the delivery of employment. So they're actually not objecting to the principle of the loss of it in terms of the scale of it, etc. So, I mean, obviously it's not a core employment area, it's an opportunity site that potentially could come forward, but it isn't actually being used for employment. It's not like a loss of employment, it's a vacant site. So it's a brownfield site, and we've got to look at it in that way. Okay.
Just to mention, Chairman, in looking at the issue of the allocation, it is allocated for employment uses. As you've heard from Chris, it's not considered that we could really substantiate a refusal on the rest of that employment, potential employment use, balancing that with the fact that this is affordable housing, it's not residential market housing, it's affordable housing, and we've got a significant policy push to deliver affordable housing. So balancing that loss of employment potential, not of true employment use, but potential use, with the provision of affordable housing, that officers are recommending that this application be refused in principle on that basis.
Michelle?
I'm still bothered by the fact of the access for the construction vehicles, no matter what is said in one way or another. If they have not tried to negotiate with the leasee about whether we can use that access during certain hours of the morning or certain hours of the evening or some other some time that's acceptable to everyone, it would be a much better idea than trying to bring heavy construction lorries through inadequate roads. And I just can't see doing anything else other than that at this point and approving it.
Okay, members, there's clearly some disquiet about this. I don't think any members are against the principle of there being 6 affordable houses built at this location, because clearly there's a desperate need for affordable houses. But I think there are issues that we need to explore further in terms of the access during the construction period, and I personally am not comfortable with that. So I'm going to suggest, members, would you support a proposal to defer the decision on this to see whether a very clear message could be sent back to the applicant to look at how we might address the legitimate concerns of the planning committee and the residents there as to whether more forcefully we could talk with our own property services department to try and establish whether there were an alternative scheme that could be put in place. Possibly that might mean deferring constructing these dwellings until the lease expires. That doesn't mean we can't construct them, but I think at the moment there's significant member disquiet. So, members, would you be broadly in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm putting a proposal to defer a decision pending further discussions with the applicant and also with property services to see whether it's possible to arrange alternative, improved, temporary access arrangements during the construction period. So I'm putting that proposal forward. Chris is seconding it. So that is a valid proposal. I'm now putting it to the vote to defer a decision. And that is unanimously deferred. So we're going to defer that. That does not mean it's been refused. It doesn't mean it's been approved. It means we're going to go away and try and get some more work to come up with something that addresses your concerns. Thank you, members. We now move on to another affordable housing application, which is land at Anson Walk. Yeah, that's okay. If people want, some of the people who are here to speak or just wish to leave. Graham Vaughan, I think you're contacting them for us.
Thank you, that looks like she doesn't want. Sorry. No, it's all right. No, it's all right.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the erection of 4 flats on the land adjacent to 1 Anson Walk. The site is in a major development location and on the boundary between Woking and Reading Borough Councils. It's adjacent to Whitley Wood Road but accessed from Anson Crescent. The site is currently used as an area for parking for local residents, as well as a small area of grass which is surrounded by a brick wall. There was an error when uploading to the agenda, so unfortunately the site plan was not attached. It is in the members' update attached at the end. I've also included it here. On the left you've got the existing site, and on the right it's the proposed site. As said, it's the erection of 4 flats with parking spaces and amenity space. The building will be 2 stories and comprise of 2 sections connected through a stairwell. The site would still be accessed from Anson Crescent, and the wall adjacent to Whitley Wood Road would remain, as would the trees next to this wall, with the exception of 1. Members didn't attend a site visit, so I will just kind of go through a few photos to show you the site itself. So this is standing on the site, and you can see the parking with the grass area behind it. So this is just up the access road, and again you can see the parking down on the left. Then just standing from the other side of the site, looking towards the access road and the small area of grass on the other side as well. This is the front of the site from Whitley Wood Road. You can see on the left and the site itself behind that. The area is residential, and therefore further residential development is acceptable. The scheme was revised slightly to keep the proposal within the building line of the street. There are numerous designs and materials within the immediate street scene, resulting in a mixed appearance. and as such it is considered introduction of slightly different designs to the immediate neighbours does not have a harmful impact. Additionally, the height of the proposal is higher than the neighbouring properties, but again there is already variation in the street scene. Just to demonstrate that, this is looking to the right of the site on Whitwood Road. Reading Borough Council is on the right hand side and Woking on the left, and you can see the difference in the style of properties. Just look slightly further around and just to highlight the different roof forms and the different materials. Again, then looking to the left of the site, obviously you can see the hipped roof form on the left, and then slightly further down the street the slightly more complex form with those properties there in the middle. There are no harmful impacts on residential amenity. The parking element is considered acceptable, though some clarification is in the members' update. Kind of the best way to explain is that there will be 4 spaces provided for the flats and 4 spaces provided for local residents. This means that there is a net loss of 1 space for local residents, but this could be accommodated within the local highway network without detriment to highway safety. The provision of amenity space for the flats is relatively small, but it's still considered acceptable. There are trees adjacent to the site, which are next to the wall with Whitwood Road. They do contribute significantly to the street scene. One of them would be removed, but the others would remain. In itself, this is acceptable. However, the tree and landscape officer has raised concern about overshadowing of the amenity space, leading to requests for works of trees. Additionally, there is a Scots pine near the site, which is a category A tree, and the root protection area of this would be affected by the proposal. However, it's considered this can be resolved through technical details, which can be agreed through conditions. Again, just to illustrate, looking at the front of the site, in the centre of the picture, you'll see some of the trees. And then the Scots pine just to the right of the site as well. Just to go through the members' update, just a couple of things. Changes to the report, to add to, as there are no side-facing windows serving habitable rooms, there will be no harmful impact on residential community. As I said about the site plan that's attached. Clarified the parking situation in terms of basically 1 net loss, but still being acceptable. Just a quick note on the fact that the application requires both SIL and Section 106. That's because the application is SIL liable, as it would result in new residential dwellings. However, the applicant is providing the properties as affordable units, and therefore a legal agreement through Section 106 is required. Also just clarify about the ridge height of the proposal, but again, as there is variation in the street scene, this is not considered to be harmful. There's also an additional condition relating to working hours. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Could we firstly just get clarification on the issue about the tree and the fact that the full root protection area wouldn't be provided for in this use? You referred to it as alternative technical arrangements. Could you clarify on that, please, what that means? Because normally we don't like to see things coming within the root protection area of protected trees.
So the root protection area is there to indicate obviously where the roots are, but basically the infringement into it is only slightly. So ultimately it is a case of a small kind of impact on those roots, and indeed not kind of impacting significantly on the tree. When discussing with the tree and landscape officer, obviously it goes beyond a bit kind of what we would perhaps discuss now, but there are ways and means that they can use in terms of being able to bridge over roots to get any kind of construction and indeed footings in without being substantially harmful.
Excellent. Thank you. John.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I mean, I welcome Mrs. Social does it. I've actually visited the site with the ward member. It's a very unattractive piece of wasteland in the middle of an urban setting. People use it to dump their cars and rubbish and so on and so forth, and I think this is the best way of using the land. It's the only comment.
questions about the parking in particular. You're only going to have 4 parking spaces, 4 additional parking spaces for the residents as well, or 4 only parking spaces for the residents? Since there are 4 flats there, the standards of walking 8 spaces plus spaces for visitors. What are you planning to do about that?
Do let Chris answer that. Bear in mind, Michelle, 2 of the flats are a single bedroom.
But still, realistically, in this area, unfortunately, everybody has 2 cars, even if there's only a 1-bedroom flat.
As I often remind you, Michelle, we have a policy on this. And if we need to change the policy, we need to change the policy. Planning committee is not the place to change the policy. Let's hear from Chris, and he can give us chapter and verse.
In relation to the parking, there is currently the land that is there, obviously is being used by people to park on, but it isn't official parking that's available. Therefore, the 4 parking spaces that are being, 1 allocated to each apartment, and the 4 other spaces are unallocated parking spaces which will be available for these tenants and perhaps others obviously that wish to use it or those that currently do. From looking at the area, there are a number, it's probably a slide I probably should have given Graham actually that I prepared, which basically shows that the road running behind or leading to the rear of this is currently used by on-street parking. So along the crescent itself, it's used by on-street parking, and there's quite sufficient room for that to take place. And also on the main road itself, so the housing, the units just to the right of the red site. So that road there is currently used for parking, and then just obviously adjacent to the site itself, leading out to the main road, those houses, you can point to the ground, just to the north of the site. So the houses just to the north of the site boundary, those people tend to park out on the main road itself. And obviously that road is actually in Reading's ownership, and they don't have any parking control at all in that area. Residents typically park in the area. Therefore, we are content that this meets the parking standard. 1 space allocated for each, as well as having unallocated parking, which is obviously in line with our policy.
Reading is known for its notorious parking ordinance.
It may be, but there is no parking restrictions.
There's parking restrictions, they can't apply non-existent restrictions. John?
Can I just add that this was built before the lunacy of small roads and limited parking under the previous government. This was built back in the late 50s, early 60s, and the roads are very wide, and there is no park. I didn't live far from there some years ago, and I can say that parking is not a problem like it is in places like Shingley Park. So it's wrong to assume it's like that. It's not.
So in essence, there are 4 guaranteed parking spaces for the 4 flats and 4 potential additional parking spaces, which will be available to them and others, depending on who gets the spaces first, I guess. Anyone else wishing to speak on this application? In that case, members, you have a peer recommendation in front of you with, I think, just the 1 additional condition. The hours of construction condition, I think it was on the condition 14. So apart from that's the only change from the members' update. So members, could you please indicate that you're willing to support this application? Right, and those you're abstaining, right?
Abstaining because of the parking.
Okay, that's fine. Sure. So that application is approved with 6 members approving and 1 abstention. Thank you, members. We now move on to the Revenant application. This application is at Green Isle in Walgrave Road, or off Walgrave Road, or more precisely, the application is in the middle of the River Thames. It's one of our slightly more unusual site visits, and members actually ventured outside of the borough and across to Henley and had a look at it from Mill Lane, as well as from the Remnant side, and as well as obviously visiting the island and the existing host property. So, Graham, straight across to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the site is located in Greenbelt and designated countryside, and although access from Walgrave Road in Remnant, the dwelling itself is on an island in the River Thames. Parking and turning area is accessed from Walgrave Road with pedestrian access onto the island from a footbridge. The scheme is for a replacement dwelling in order to construct a building that will be resilient to flooding and low intensity energy usage. The proposal also includes a boathouse which would use existing river space but have an earth covering to blend into the area. The property would be of a contemporary design with an emphasis on views to the river. You obviously went on a site visit, so I'll kind of go through a quick whistle-stop tour on terms of the site. So this is the dwelling on the island. As you remember, it sits to one end of the island at the moment. Just looking from the opposite directions, the amenity space for the dwelling. And then this is looking across to the parking area over on Walgrave Road. And then these are the flats and the other developments adjacent to the River Island site. The boathouse and the dwelling existed prior to 1947, and therefore this forms the original level of volume. Although there is great emphasis on volume at first and second floor with a void underneath the river side of the dwelling, the footprint of the dwelling is actually reduced. This means that the increase in volume across the site, taking into account the dwelling and the boathouse, will be 34% above the original, and therefore the proposal is considered to be compliant with Greenbelt policy. In terms of character, the dwelling will be set back more centrally on the island, and although larger than the existing, it will not be substantially taller. It's recognised that there's been some concern raised regarding the scale of the proposal, and therefore a scale model has been produced to show the impact will not be significantly harmful. Like you'll see here, the top picture shows the existing dwelling and the bottom the proposed dwelling. Really just to point out that the actual volume would be relatively similar to the existing. And this is just to show the views. For the top is from the river, and the bottom is from the Marshall Mill Flats, which I showed was on the other side of the river. Just again to highlight that there is very limited impact from the proposed dwelling compared to the existing. In terms of appearance, whilst it would be a contemporary dwelling, there is no defining style or design along the river. This is obviously the application site, and you can see the flats to the right-hand side. Turning slightly further right, again you've got a further dwelling in another architectural style. Looking left from that photo, you can see bungalows of kind of another style again. And then turning to the Oxfordshire side, again you see another style of dwelling. Looking along the walkway towards Marsh Lock, you can see the lockkeeper's house on the left. And again, then just turning slightly to the right, opposite Marsh Lock, you've then got a further different type of dwelling as well. The design of the proposal has been driven by flood risk, and due to the reduction in footprint and the style of the property, there is a positive impact in terms of flood risk at the site. The shape reduces the impact on the flow of the river, and the location of the boathouse would help to deflect debris in case of a flood event. Although this is a specialised field, Backer Architects have been working closely with the Environment Agency, not only on this project, but also in advising on flood matters. The EA do not object to this proposal, and indeed the Council's Drainage Advisor, WSB, also do not object. I think the agent will possibly discuss further, but as on the site, we did talk about the advice on flooding, and indeed, although I didn't include it in the members update, I have got it here, and just to highlight it, there is a range of advice that Backer Architects have provided regarding flooding. Just to go through the members update, there are a few changes to the report. Firstly, bullet point 1 of the applicant's points to be replaced with the proposals for an innovative and ambitious project will be pioneering in house building of local and national significance in the context of flood mitigation and resilience. And also a slight change of wording from striking appearance to contemporary appearance. At the end of paragraph 10 on page 113, if you insert the word not at the end of that paragraph to read correctly. Also, with regards to paragraph 24 on page 116 regarding SIL, the amount stated is incorrect. The increase in floor space is 77 metres squared, and therefore the SIL charge should read as £28,105. However, the project would be classed as self-build and therefore would be exempt from SIL in any case. Just clarification on the impact on neighbouring dwellings. At the moment, the dwelling is 25 metres from the closest residential dwelling, and it would be moving further away as a result of the proposal. The tree and landscape officer has confirmed that as the willow tree on the site is near the end of its life, its loss is acceptable, and indeed we would look to get a suitable replacement through a landscaping plan and at the condition stage. There's a little bit further information regarding flood risk, and also when we were on site we obviously looked at the access, and in response to that we're proposing putting on firstly an informative regarding the setback of any gates provided, and also an additional condition to provide a construction method statement in order to kind of hopefully assess what issues there would be in terms of getting the vehicles into the site, etc. Also on that point, I've had an informal kind of discussion with the agent to say that the applicant is aware that the access is not great, and indeed that will be something they would be looking to do, but it's not part of this current application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Graham. Members, as I say, we visited the site. I think if I could just summarise some of the things we've heard, that firstly it's a 34% increase, and as you know in Greenbelt is guidance, there's a 35% limit, so it's within that. It's clearly a different design style from the existing property, but as we saw there are a wide variety of styles and appearances of property on both sides of the river. We've heard that the Environment Agency and WPC's own flooding people support the application, and that the proposed new dwelling is actually moving further on the island, so it's actually further away from the immediate neighbours. Disappointing to see the loss of the dominant willow tree, but I think we understand the reasons behind that. So before we go on to discuss it, we just need to invite three people who registered to speak. Firstly, Alison Barraclough from Remenham Parish Council. Sorry?
Can I go first?
If you wish, it's not the normal way we do it, John, but I have no objection to that.
My name is John Halsall. I'm the Borough Councillor and Chairman of Parish Council. Alison Barraclough is on the Parish Council. Thank you very much for visiting the site and listing this and extensively looking at it for all aspects. The objections are on three bases. One is the scale and design, which Graham's covered very adequately. I still find it very hard to understand how a two-storey, four-bedroomed house now becomes a three-storey, seven-bedroom house with 6 bathrooms, and it's only 34% of the volume. And I think I would be very questionable of those calculations. The visual impact of this, of course, is a very subjective criteria on the green belt, and whilst not advocating to design based on traditional values, it is felt a more modest two-storey property would be appropriate on this site. There is no similar design of modern architecture along the whole of the Henley Reach from Marsh Lock to Hambledon Lock and beyond. All of the buildings are of a 50s, 60s or a Edwardian style. The environmental impact has been very adequately covered, and the proposed removal of established trees in order to accommodate new development would have a significantly detrimental impact, and I'm very pleased to see that there's a lot of conditionality on the trees and a planting scheme. The one issue which hasn't really been adequately covered, I feel, by the conditions, is the impact on wildlife. The mill pool is a significant wildlife haven due to a slower flowing and shallow stream which provides food and protection for a wide range of birds and nests. Nesting here is swans, grebes, coots, moorhens, diving ducks, geese and kingfishers. So I feel that there should be a condition 7. Condition 7 should be widened from bats to all the associated animals. Also, this is further urbanisation of that stretch of river, and we would ask that the consideration should be given to making this a conservation area, so that all the trees and or fauna are protected. And lastly, I think Graham has commented very constructively on the construction plan. It is, as you know, a very, very narrow site on a very, very busy road. And I would have thought that a lot of conditionality needs to be applied to the construction and the movement of vehicles on that road. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you. And now Alice Barrett.
Good evening. Just to pick up a couple of the points that John has made and expand on them a little. In my view, the development is moving the position of the house so that it follows the river on a southeast northeast line, and it's expanding the urban development along the river. I think that we've definitely got, and we've seen a lot of this in Birmingham, a lot of increased urbanisation of the riverfront and increased urban sprawl, and I think that's something which should be avoided. I think also the bulk is unnecessary. It's certainly, you've mentioned that there's a wide range of styles there. I think predominantly though, the style of the river is Edwardian 1930s. If you take beyond the immediate location into consideration, we've only looked at a couple of properties there, and I think the size of this property or this proposal is contentious, and I don't think it's in keeping with the location, which is a verdant and rural site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now if I could call upon Richard Coops as the agent to speak.
Can I get the microphone? Thank you, Chairman. So Green Arm is an innovative, well-considered and designed board out of some very complex site constraints. The Green Belt is located within the functional floodplain, which means whether through climate change or changes in weather pattern, we're going to flood soon and frequently. The need to provide safe access and egress, to accommodate a dwelling, to simultaneously consider how this building is going to be constructed by minimising disruption to residents, and to provide a response to its riverside setting. My client, Mr. Cole, has lived on the site for 13 years. He's had his wedding reception there. 2 of his children have been born there. But recently, and during that period, the site has been damaged, and the most recent flooding has taken over 12 months to rectify. It's in this context that Mr. Cole has approached Backer Architects, based on our specialism in policy development and architecture in this field, and we've supplied some documentation which we provided for DEFRA, and also industry guidance which demonstrates best practice. So first of all, addressing flooding. The reason the building has been relocated slightly to the west is the position of the bridge, and not to move the bridge, and that is to allow safe access and egress for our client onto the site. It means that all of the accommodation, the main living spaces and bedroom spaces are located above the floodplain, so that's a 1 in 100 year flood event plus climate change. The building has been orientated such like so enables floodplain conveyancing, which is great for the river, which means it doesn't act as a problem for other neighbours, and it's flood resilient at lower ground, and we'll be building through our links with industry, bringing forward techniques so that hopefully you'll no longer see the blight of plastic flood guards along the river. Now, addressing some of the concerns in terms of the volume, those calculations stack up and they've been checked by the planning department. And in terms of its style, if you look no further than Temple, the starting point of Henley Regatta, you'll see an island of a similar scale, a white, beautiful building. I think it appears in a number of logos, and I think you'll find that our building, whilst it's contemporary in design, does have a nod to traditional styles. So in summary, the design has been developed over the last year with extensive consultation with both the planning authority and EA. The design has evolved. The building is sited within its site, shrouded by vegetation, so it's very well protected. The scheme is compliant in policy, it's intelligent, it's of a high architectural standard, and very much like our amphibious house in Marlow, which that was built in a conservation area, is now regarded as a national and international exemplar, and we hope that the flood resilient house here will become an exemplar again in its own right and help fellow river dwellers in this situation have a better example for flood resilience. And on that basis, we trust you agree and will see this fit to grant the scheme for approval. Thank you for your time.
Could you turn your microphone? Thank you. Right, members wishing to speak, I'll go to Chris first and then John.
I think if we were to refuse it because of the appearance of the building, then that would be because of the view from the other side of the Thames. So I noticed that South Oxfordshire District Council had no comments. Were the residents on the other side and the adjoining authority consulted?
Yes, they were. Basically, what was in the report is what we received.
John?
It's obviously a very comprehensive scheme, and we need to congratulate the applicant on the fact he's going to build it himself. What's the definition of self-build? This man get up on the roof with rafters and tiles?
So it's not the perhaps the definition you find in the English dictionary, in that it's not going to be the applicant literally putting the house up himself. In terms of the definition of self-build is that you commission for a house to be built, and it will be your sole residence for a minimum of 3 years. So it really is to prevent developers basically buying a site, building on it, and then moving on.
So that 3-year limit is actually stricter than the current prevailing scheme, which I think is only 2 years, isn't it? Because people are considered to be developers if they redevelop a property and move within 2 years. I know Land Revenue tends to regard that as they're doing it as part of their business, as opposed to people who are doing it for their own purposes. I suspect to a large extent, John, it's when it's being done as is indicated for someone's personal benefit rather than as part of a trade.
I understand that. Sorry. I understand that, but building this fabulous house is obviously for somebody's benefit financially.
Also as a dwelling?
Still, financially.
Okay. As is any development, I guess. Michelle?
I like the idea that it's actually being in keeping with the area to a certain extent, and also flood protection. I would like to see some more flood protection in a few of the sites we've looked at, including a couple of them that are rather squelchy when we walk through them, and I'd rather see some of these designs there than some of the designs that the developers are putting up. So I think they actually might be a great idea in some of the areas.
Any other members wishing to speak on this application? I see no contrary views being put forward by members of the committee. So members, we have an application F2014-2784 for the reconstruction of the dwelling on Green Isle. All those prepared to support, please indicate.
Can I, sorry, one question?
No, John, sorry, we're already there now.
One, 2, 3, 4.
Do you wish to abstain, John?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right, okay. So that is carried. Thank you very much, members. Okay, that concludes the items, I think, on the actual formal part of the agenda, but we've also got some reports